Hey everyone, cheers to Saturday. Chase here from the Cruiser Cult. Today I thought we would talk about the dreaded and justifiably dreaded gutter reseal on our Toyota Land Cruisers here. So join me and let's get into how to get this messy job done. All right, so the weather's turning, starting into fall, starting to rain a lot more. It's definitely raining a lot here in Seattle. You know, some parts of the country are already seeing snow. So it's really a good time of the year to start really thinking about weatherproofing your Land Cruiser, you know, keeping water out and probably more importantly, keeping the rust at bay. And one of the notorious areas on Land Cruisers here, especially in the 40 series and the 60 series, and probably even the 70 and 80 series to come, they're a little newer, but it's rust generated from the leaky gutters here, you know, and the roof panels here. And the 40 crowd has been dealing with this longer than the 60 series crowd just based on the age of the vehicles. You know, so over time, these roof joints here are pretty complicated, especially in the 60 series and 70 series and up. 40 series a little simpler. But basically, you have the roof panel coming down, meeting with the vertical part of the body panel. There's actually even a couple more metal panels in there. And what you end up with is a seam here in this gutter. Now the gutter is there, of course, to direct water away from coming down the side and putting water pressure on the door seals, helping keeping water out of the vehicle and guiding it gently away down these A-pillars. Now, there's also that metal seam in this gutter. And what Toyota did was they put a very thin bead of seam sealer here to cover that metal overlap. It's like spot welds along inside the gutter. And over time, that seam sealer can get old and crack. And when you have cracks in the seam sealer, water pressure starts going in the crack, and then it starts attacking that overlapping metal there. And the water can get into the metal here, you know, wick in there, start rust, open the gap more and more, and it gets worse and worse. And that can compound with potential moisture issues in the cabin, which can condense and then settle down in this area as well. And this is a really complicated metal structure area here in the Land Cruisers, and it can trap water and moisture, and then what you end up getting is classic rust issues here in the roof, which is a huge pain to fix, especially in the wagons. Now, you know, that involves cutting out the metal, and it also involves taking out the headliner, because if you don't take out the headliner and you start cutting out the metal and spot welding, you can cause a fire in your headliner, so definitely not a good thing. The 40 series people, it's a little easier. You have to take off the whole roof cap, but they have the luxury of just being able to unrivet and replace the metal gutter around their fiberglass top. They can re-rivet it and then do more seam sealer. With the wagons, we don't have that luxury. The roof is, you know, part of the vehicle forever, and it's a lot more complicated. So it's really good idea to stay on top of any cracks in your gutter and, you know, really be proactive about it if you don't already have rust forming. And if you do already have big rust holes, you know, sorry about that, but that's going to be a much bigger project that we won't cover in this quick video here. So, the gutters, how to reseal them. If you're pressed for time and you can't do it this year, you know, we're kind of limited by, especially the, you know, garage level mechanics here. We don't have the luxury of, you know, really heat controlled areas, especially when you're considering optimal curing temperatures for paints and sealants. It's getting cold. You can do a thin bead of a high quality urethane sealer over the top of your old gutters to, you know, bide you some time if they're not too bad. But to do the full job, we'll get into that right now. So basically, well, you know, we have the 60 series here, which uses a demonstration, but this methodology can be applied to the 40 series, you're putting a new seam sealer down, or the 70 or even 80 series. So if you have, you know, gutter trim here, take it off, and then the messy job begins. You have to actually get out all this old seam sealer. It's pretty nasty. I used a Dremel with a synthetic, like abrasive brush. Others have used an angle grinder with a really thin wire wheel to really gouge out that old seam sealer quick. That's definitely a much faster way. The Dremel way was definitely slower. So I tackled this whole project a few years ago before I really knew some of the extra tips, and I learned a lot from my initial gutter reseal, you know, which is good. We all learn from our mistakes. It's important. And so now I can share with you, some really good ways to go about this. So basically, grind out all that old seam sealer from around the vehicle. Make sure you get it really clean, and then treat any surface rust you see, anything at all, treat it with some OSFO, some rust dissolver, and get rid of any rust you see there. And then the next tip would be to clean it really well. So this is the whole thing with paint, right? It's all about prep. So you're gonna want to get it all out, then you're gonna want to clean it all with a grease and wax remover chemical. And then it's always a good idea to go back over your area before you paint with some like tack wipes. And the trick with those is, you can ball them up and just kind of run it really lightly over the area you're gonna paint. Don't put pressure on that stuff because it's coated with the sticky material to catch all those fine fibers. So the trick with those is you don't really have to rub. It's just gliding it over to get all that dust out from this area here. Now, then that brings us to actual paint. So this is the type of job that it's going to take probably a couple days to do it right. And it's really worth investing the extra money in high quality materials like sealants. So for the sealant I use a 3M brand, the double-barreled cartridges, and they use a special gun, and the gun cost me an extra, $25. I think the cartridge alone was in the 20s, and I used one cartridge, so that was enough. And the stuff I liked about the 3M, it's not only a really high-quality product, but it's a two-part system, so it's catalyzed. You're not sitting here waiting for the total optimal temperature or letting it air cure. It's a quick cure, and it's going to work well. So it's worth investing in the two-part systems, and that even goes for the paint. So use the 3M brand I'd recommend. There are other good brands out there though, and use a self-leveling seam sealer, and pay attention to the cure time on the product you buy. So the main mistake that I made when I first did this is I bought what is referred to as, sorry, there's a dog barking in the background. All right, let's try again. Sorry, I had to deal with the dog issue. Okay, so the main mistake that I made was buying the 3M controlled flow seam sealer. And the difference between the controlled flow and the self-leveling is that the self-leveling spreads out a lot quicker, and the controlled flow is supposed to spread out a lot slower. And I got that because I was worried about the A-pillars here, about the self-leveling just running down and causing a big mess. So I went for the controlled flow, but I did not pay attention to the cure time, which was only like a couple minutes, and I did it in a hot summer day in the garage, and so it cured super fast. I didn't have time to do a nice thin bead, and it did not come out that nice looking. I won't show you the close-up here, but it's sealed. That's all that matters. So really pay attention to the cure time of the seam sealer you're using, and make sure you're going to have enough time to go along the whole gutter and smooth it out either with a gloved wet finger here, and do a nice and make a thin bead there, and make sure it's nice and smooth and thin over the seam. You don't need a lot of seam sealer here. Don't overdo it, because if you do, like me with the too quick cure time, it's almost too fat to get your chrome gutter trim back on. So I would recommend not using the controlled flow unless you're a professional and you can work really quick, but go for the self-leveling seam sealer. Now, once your gutters are totally clean, you're happy with any rust treatment, and you got all the old seam sealer out, you're going to want to invest in some good 2K epoxy primer. Now, again, this is going back to, it's worth it to spend a little extra for the nicer materials, because you don't want to go in there again. You don't want to try to redo a factory job with worse materials than they used. You don't want to do this job again. Trust me. And so it's worth it to spend for the 2K primer to get a nice, really good seal. So what you're going to want to do is tape off the area you want to paint. And to do that, the one trick you're going to want to use to get a nice transition here with the paint is to do a soft backing, a soft edge here. So the trick for that you would get your masking paper here, your 3M automotive tape. Don't use painter's tape. Try to get some nicer quality automotive grade painting tape here. You want to put the tape along the edge you want to block off where you want the paint to stop. So this edge here. And then what you're going to want to do is then flip that backwards like this. And now, so what that's basically creating here is the tape is kind of like this. Here's the surface of the paint, here's the tape like this. And so now you have this kind of curved area here. And so when you're painting, all that paint's hitting that curved seam. And so it causes a gradation of paint to go into the cavity. So less and less paint is making it into that curved area there. And you get a soft, faded paint edge here, not a hard edge here like I mistakenly did. And so what that means is it's just less time to go back and sand and make it look like a nice blended job. You can of course do the hard edge, but then you get a nice built up hard edge and it's a lot more work to blend it. So it's worth it to do the soft edge taping here and mask it off nicely. Now you're going to want to do the 2K primer. Once you're done, masking it all off, everything's clean, do the 2K primer, and then you do the seam sealer. And take your time with that, do a good job, make sure it's nice and thin, don't overdo it. You get a nice flat application across the whole gutter. Now following the seam sealer, then you would want to do, once that's cured and follow the instructions on whatever seam sealer brand you use, do another coat of primer, and then following cure time of that, then do the top coat of your choice. Now I've had really good luck with this automotive touch-up brand, touch-up paint. They've always matched the blue really well. You can't quite even see, I painted the gutter here to the original paint. It's actually pretty close. Of course, if your vehicle is older and has worse faded paint, then it's probably going to be almost impossible to match the original color because it's so faded now. But if your paint's in good condition, I recommend checking out this operation. It's not too expensive. I think it's like 20 bucks for a can. But it matched really well. It's the easy thing, right? It's just spray, it matches, it's great. So, and then once you're done with that, I don't know, depending on the paint you can get a 2K urethane clear coat, or if the type of paint you use doesn't need a clear coat, then you can just forget that step. And you should be good to go. Yeah, so those are kind of the main tips I would say for doing the gutters. Really make sure that you pick a seam sealer with a cure time that you can work in, and really go through and clean this really well. And again, this applies to all the different series. Even though I'm talking about 60 series, the 40 series also uses a seam sealer over their fiberglass to metal rivet gutter system, and the 70 and 80 series use a similar gutter. I think the 100 series uses a totally different gutter system, so we don't have to worry about that. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Hit us up if you have any questions. We'll post some links to some of the recommended products, and we'll have some other pictures of when I did it, and you can see kind of the process. But this is definitely a really worthwhile project to undertake. It's kind of a ticking time bomb thing. If you haven't done it yet, it's original, and the seam sealer is original. It's going to crack. It's going to slowly let in water. And it's going to eventually rust up here if something's not done. That's something we don't want to deal with because it's such a messy job. Yeah, hopefully that was really helpful. And yeah, cheers everyone. I don't have a drink today, oddly enough. Maybe I had too many salty dogs yesterday, but yeah. Anyways, hopefully everyone has a great weekend. Cheers to Saturday. Thanks for everyone that's watching and all the likes and follows. We really appreciate the support. Yeah, thanks.